Hi there, it's Vanessa Callahan. Welcome to your Monday Mindset Moment. Always so happy to be in community with you all. And it's been such a lovely time being with this group over the past several years. I realizing that it's been now since like 2019, so 2020, 1, 2, 3. We're in our fifth year together with about 1.2 thousand members, so about 1,200 people. And that's a big deal. And I just want to acknowledge that those of you who have been listening and following and are just getting to know my work and just getting to be a part of the community, don't forget to get into the group. There's a lot here for you. Just in the posts and videos that have been stacking up over the months and years, and the questions that people pose. It's been just a great experience. And we are starting something new. It's going to transition a bit, but the group will still be here. But I do have a special announcement today that I'm going to be making around what you can expect coming from me and from my team over the next coming months. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we do have our topic for today. And I am excited to share with you some insights about it because of how much it's impacted my life to be able to get around this idea that I think is circulating in a lot of our spaces with kids. And, it's sometimes one of those things I maybe overhear at a park or at a restaurant, and I kind of go, oof, that's kind of putting a lot of strain on things that maybe isn't necessary. So here's what I want to say about this is that there are times when it will work for you to say, use your words, right? And there are times when it really won't work. And so here we are checking out big emotions and when use your words doesn't work. So, what is a big emotion, first of all? A big emotion is one that overwhelms your current capacity or ability or skill in coping. So, I mean, even the definition of overwhelm is just that. It's like the demands of the environment exceed the resources you have to cope with those demands or to meet those demands. And so when we say overwhelm or a big emotion, it's when the balance is off. And so most likely what will happen next is that there is a need for the person, whether it's the child or the parent or the grandparent or the sibling, um, to recover. And what we need to understand about these big emotions and this experience of overwhelm is that it does kick us into a different cognitive state. And when we have this different cognitive state, it's not easy to process language. And so some folks out there might call this use limited language. I like that. I think it could be more descriptive, and I'm hoping to get into the nuances today with you, just like I do with all of my clients. So one thing I want you to know about this is that every person that I've ever worked with and or excuse me had in my life has certain like tells that they're not quite available for processing language. And what I mean by tells, it's like a poker game. It's like you're trying to read the other person to get a sense, and like in this case, adult to child, attune to them, so you can get a sense of what is their capacity right now to cope, and will am I providing what they need, or are they getting from their environment what they need to get to a place where they're coping enough that their language is back and available, their language processing, their language expression, comprehension, all aspects of it. And so I want you to think about your children in your world and what some of their tells might be that they're not going to necessarily take in your language, and maybe asking them also to find their words might be out of reach or even unreasonable and unfair at that moment. Okay. At the very least, unproductive. So in the chat, I've got Lillian here. Hey, Lillian, good to see you. She just joined our year-long program in the last month or so, and we've been having a lot of fun getting to know her and her family. And Tanisha's here also on Zoom. Those of you who are listening on YouTube, guessing that maybe Gianni's listening to this, and a couple of others who've been watching all the videos. and folks who are finding us for the first time, just write in the comments or the chat, what is it that you could look for in your child's sort of in their gestures, in their voice, in their behaviors, that could help you have clues that maybe language needs to be limited, and that asking them to use their words might be something out of reach at that moment. So here's some examples. Like, I had a student whose cheeks would flash red, so she had a big tell. But another child, it was more that she would tense up and she'd look at one place and just stare. And that was her tell. Like, okay, we're getting into a place where we may not be very productive if we try and get them to use their words productively. Now, can we ask a child to use their words to express what's bothering them? Maybe at that time, but it's going to be much more in the, now we're taking care of you before you come back to maybe use your words with someone else, right? So oftentimes the use your words phrase comes up when kids are doing something besides words, right? They're maybe using their hands or an object, or perhaps, yeah, destroying property even, right? Something that you might really want them to stop doing physically. And you're saying, well, oh, use your words. And then they're not using their words, right? Okay, I've got one from Lillian. Great. A specific kind of whine for one child, a locked jaw and wild eyes for another. Good. Okay. Let's keep them coming. Tanisha, I'm wondering if you have one or two that you've noticed as well. And for another layer of this, are what are your tells for your own self that you're getting to a place where using your words to try to solve this problem may not be the best choice either. And Lillian will talk a lot more about this in the Emotional Mastery Weekend. Of course, we'll talk about all the ways that our emotions kind of run things and run us, and different ones that feel different in your body. But just in your first blush, like what is one of your tells? What's something that you know that when you start to feel this way in your body, or you start to think a certain way, that it's probably time, not a productive time, to try and solve things with your words. And if you imagine, if both the adult and the child get a handle on this, it could move towards more productive connections and conversations. So this is a good self-reflection moment. I know for me, I can get a more, like, just generally more negative. And I think it runs in my family, and especially with the women. Like my mother, my grandmother, it's like we can go pretty dark quickly in our thinking. And I've learned you know, I learned not to express those thoughts towards anyone who it would do harm to, because of how outrageous they can be. So that's one thing I look for my thinking. Also looping, like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, especially if it's an upset thought of any kind. Yeah, like, oh, I wish they hadn't said that, or whatever it is, over and over. So that looping. I also get tense in my shoulders, and sometimes I forget to breathe. So I'm like tense and not breathing very well. And that can lead to a whole lot of other sensations. I would say when it's really quick lid stuff, usually I have a flash of heat. Tanisha just said she feels like she's heating up. I have a flash of heat and even start to break a sweat. So I have some kind of cortisol, adrenaline experience that puts me into a like activated mode of being able to fight or flee. So I definitely feel that at times. Yeah, good. Okay. And then a new one for me is actually, so there's fight, flight, right? Freeze, and then there's appease, which is if I suddenly get into this mode of like, oh, let's make everybody feel better and okay. And I'm just sort of like going around being very kind of like mother hen, like to, oh, check out all the chicks or something. And I'm just sort of in this like heightened state of trying to appease or please, and maybe even like just give people what they want, even if it's not good for them or it's not good for me, and not really acknowledging like that stuff that's happening that's out of bounds. I just want to kind of like keep the peace or make the peace. And so that's an interesting one too. So fight, flight, freeze, appease are some. And then there's like a version of flight that's really interesting to me, is sort of this idea of slightly or fully dissociating, where you kind of like leave, like you're no longer present and like engaged, and you're kind of checking out. And I think this is a quick way to check out, oh god, your phone, which is fine. Sometimes you just need, like, I need an adult moment, looking at something that's not children or whatever it might be. I want us to be mindful of that one, because I think it's the sneakiest one, where we kind of just start to tune out, check out, and then even dissociate, where we go, we can't remember what happened because we weren't there on some level. Anyway, so whatever your tell is, I want you to notice that when this comes up, if you start to try and force the word, like force the words, like you like, oh, I better communicate and solve this problem. Like I think we can get very stuck in like, let's solve this. Let's try to work it out with our words. I want you to know, good news for you and your kids, that there are a lot of other options to try first when those tells are there. Okay. And really the goal isn't even to solve the problem. It might be to like move things towards safety and maybe do some redirection, give some other, you know, options, throw some options out and see if they just land and they go, right? Like, how about we put this toy away right now and we try something else, and sometimes it's enough to kind of like, oh, let's put those lids back on. The other times they really do need to do something with that energy or they need a break from the trigger. And so the next move isn't use your words. It's, hey, why don't we step aside over here and like, let me assess what you need next to cope to get that lid back on and those tells start to fade away. So here's the other side of tells. What is a sign that your child seems to now be ready? Like, what's a tell that they're ready to re-engage or ready to come back and maybe use their words with the person that they've harmed or they were about to harm, right? What are those tells? For me, it's like there's a softening that happens for me. I just feel it. I soften. For kids, I've seen everything from they start to say more novel things, so they're not looping on something. They also, myself and children, I've seen use less severe language. Like they might say things like, instead of always, and you never, and you're the worst, or they're the best, and I'm the worst, or, these like superlatives of the most, right? The most good or the most bad, or the always, like this little, this finality to it. That's a very lid off, not a good time to try and use your words, sort of a symptom. But what's the opposite of that? I would say that they're starting to nuance things. And this is even for ourselves, like, oh, sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's not. That's a good one. Another could be, well, I may not be the best, but I'm also not the worst, right? Or they're not the worst, but they're also not great at this, right? There's something like this could be better. Maybe they're talking about younger sibling and they might say something like, well, he is only 5, or she is only 2, or she is still learning, right? And they start to like show some of that capacity to nuance and to even consider how the other person is feeling, the other person's thinking. So those are some, you can look for some physical things like that softening, or maybe they're willing to make eye contact with you and the person that they were supposed to be using their words with instead of avoiding it. Maybe they're willing to hold your hand while they talk instead of, trying to grab at their sibling or at the toy or at something. Maybe instead of crumpling down and kind of in that like hiding, like, kind of flight and hide kind of thing, maybe they're more expanded in their body language, right? They're like ready to try. Okay. So I want to say though, even if those tells are there, it is so helpful. And I've done this so many thousands of times. I can't even tell you, multiple times a day over 15 years of teaching. So it's like thousands of days of teaching. And I did it at least once a day. I would say probably more like average of 5, is that I would pull a kid aside and I would kind of game plan, like, what do you want to say instead of whatever just happened? Instead of grabbing her pencil, like, what could we try instead? And when they're younger, you can do it even like kind of in a quicker loop. Like, are you trying to show your brother you'd like a turn? Are you trying to tell mommy you'd like me to pay attention more? Are you trying to tell daddy? Are you trying to tell daddy that you're all done? Right? That's like toddler interpreter stuff. So kids under 4, especially, we can do that a lot more with. As they're getting older, you might sidebar and say, hey, what was going on there? What do you think? And then maybe they have no words still. And that's a sign they're not quite there. And you can say, well, here's what I noticed. Did I get that right? And maybe they can start nodding. Maybe they can start saying, uh-huh. And then you might say something like, well, I know we're going to need to go back into the room, or we're going to need to go over and try again. Would you like me to come with you? Okay. Would you like me to share what we just talked about with the person, or would you like to? Right. And you can kind of move it along, because I think one thing we get into trouble with here is if we're like, well, they're not ready to use their words. So we sort of like let them go do something else, and then we lose track of it. And so what often it requires is to drop in with them, help them calm down, help them find words, even if you have to speak them for them, bring it back, and then show some readiness and see if things can move forward. And imagine as a teacher with 12, 12, 24, 36, at one point 48 children in the school environment. Like I didn't have a half an hour. Right? Like I could let a kid hang out in like our calm down zone for up to, I think we had a time limit. They decided on was 15 minutes, for up to 15 minutes while I attended to other things. But then I would, in terms of the actual time I spent with each child when they would have these big upsets, unless it was something pretty egregious, um, like 5 minutes at a time, like it could be stages of five. So it's like five to check in and kind of sort things out a little so they can go calm down, go do other things, come back, bring them back, do a little facilitating 5 minutes, but then step away, kind of observe, like, how is it going over there while I continue doing what I'm doing over here? So I also don't want you to think that this is like you have to sit down and do a 1 hour conflict mediation process in order to make an impact here. Okay. As a matter of fact, if you do that every time, I think the kids are like, you're probably talking too much and doing too much and not giving them enough space to sort of do a little self regulation and come together and find their way once you connect them back in and see, give them a chance to do it on their own, especially if it's siblings or friends, even a parent child. Sometimes we have to facilitate and help our co-parents and our partners, right? I've definitely had moments in the classroom where I was like, hey, everybody, can I help? Can I be helpful here? Between all kinds of folks. So all of these pieces coming together, I want you to understand that when use your words doesn't seem to be having the effect you would wish for, there are a lot of other options. And hopefully there's something that stood out to you today that you can try next. Thank you for joining the Money Mindset Moment. Now, it's always helpful if in the chat you can, and I especially want to say that there's this one YouTube listener who's been doing a stellar job of this and has shared with me that he listened to all of the YouTube videos and had a really great breakthrough in parent coaching or parenting and coaching his child through an emotional breakdown recently, his 5-year-old. That one of the ways that I've seen him engaging, and that's not only here, but also in the programs that I run for clients, that are of course a lot more intensive. You can absolutely get more out of a training if you just write your takeaway in the chat. And this is for not just my trainings, but any training you ever do from here on out. I have a master's in education, so I'm like this is my area I like to geek out on. So if you wanna integrate something from today, write something that you took away from the session right now, either in the replay, in the comment section, or in the chat if you're here with me live. And Catherine, glad you're here. Nice to see you, Catherine. All right. And then of course for the announcement, I'm just gonna take a moment to pull something up, but I want to start by saying if you're following me on social media at all, you probably already have a sense of what the announcement is. Because my team and I have been making these announcements across different platforms and just wanting to be really forthcoming with what's coming up next. But very excited. It's a big collaborative process to pull this off well. Very excited to share that we are indeed launching a podcast, my team and I. And when I think about podcasts, I'll just be honest, I get a little nervous because I am a big fan of podcasts and I have a lot of podcast idols. And if you ever want to jam with me about that, we can always do a sidebar on who my podcast idols are. And so it's a little bit of an edgy, vulnerable thing for me to be publishing something beyond like the kind of the bubble of the family of the My Family Foundation's immersion clients, my private clients, just my Facebook, group. That's why I keep putting it in the Facebook group and then only on the YouTube channel. Like people who are subscribed usually see it, but not necessarily everybody. So it is a kind of bigger endeavor. And also I traveled to see people in person and live interview. My coach that works in my program, Imani Aisha, she's a marriage and communication coach. And we had a really meaningful conversation about parenting and partnership, like how we create stronger partnerships in parenting and through parenting. I traveled to Colorado to see my client, who's also a coach for single moms by choice, Sarah Kowalski, and interviewed her there on site. And several other folks that I've been wanting to interview for months or years, including a staff member occupational therapist Catherine Dunn. We got together and went ahead and did a live interview locally in the Bay Area. And so there's just a lot of great pieces. So learning about things like, what do you do when emotions are running high and you just start to get triggered and all these things come up, right? And hearing the real stories of how parents have handled that, like my client Tiffany, who's going to be also in one featured in an episode, as well as of course Sarah. And then also, what do you do to like simplify your home? Like I brought in a decluttering expert, and she's wonderful, mother of five, and the house stays pretty tidy, and the kids are on it, and she's not using any kind of harsh like discipline or any reward systems to make it happen, which is pretty impressive. Like my grandmother on my dad's side had 18 children, and they basically ran their little society in that household. But that's daunting. But I just, even now, generationally, to consider having five children or even three, right, Lillian, is a big undertaking. And once you're outnumbered, right? So hearing from her, not only from being a mother of five, but her, she's helped thousands of families with decluttering towards child independence and just general like ease and harmony at home. So just really great interviews coming your way, as well as some content from me of things that I want every family to know about to be able to be a da 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 calm, empowered parent. That is the name of the podcast, The Calm, Empowered Parent. And I chose this after surveying hundreds of people and doing some tests to make sure it was like really something that people were looking for and interested in. And so I went ahead and had a chance to, like kind of come up with a title that, name that I felt like I could really get behind. And so that happened, as well as creating a little trailer for you today. So I'm going to share the trailer with you. And this is something that's on YouTube that you can share with others. So, but here it is, the Calm Empowered Parent Podcast. And the trailer itself is something that I'm proud of, because I put it together with my team, and we haven't done anything like this before. And it just has a lot of heart and kind of like energy and sweat and tears and love in the back end of things. So just giving you a sense of what you have coming up. Here's our kind of like our title sheet of what we're up to. And then without further ado, let's check out the trailer. Let's see if I can get the screen up. Yeah, here we go. Hey everyone, it's Vanessa, and I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you to the Calm Empowered Parent Podcast. Join me as we challenge the notion that parenting needs to be perfect and look the same for every family. Raising resilient humans is a profoundly personal and at times transformative journey, and I'm here for every step. I can't wait to empower you and your family with research-tested tools that last the ages and build lifelong relationships. Won't you join me for the Calm Empowered Parent Podcast? Together, we go so much further. Yay! And this here is where you can go to our channel. This little link here, and I'll put the link in the chat as well in just a moment. But we're thrilled, we're excited. And of course, there's going to be more to come, but you got a sneak peek today, so that's always fun. Lillian says, how exciting. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited too. I feel like it's one of those things that, once you commit to it, it gets a little edgy and you get, but you do it anyway because it's something you can really see. And I know each of you have a vision for your families as well that you can really see when you feel into it. Even on those hard days, you take a moment and you see your kid do something freaking adorable and you can't stand it, and you realize that there's rewards in this challenge of raising children, and you can expand those moments so they become more and more the norm and more how things run in your household. And I've just seen how transformative that can be in terms of the love flowing freely between family members, and maybe doing things different or even better than the previous generation in terms of what you're like, the legacy you're leaving your children about what it's like to be in a family, and maybe to be like a highly sensitive kid or a strong-willed person. I call them my spicy ones, someone who's spicy or maybe I've heard recently neurospicy, has some kind of learning challenge or disability, but it's just basically neurospicy. And what a different world we're in now, that we can provide so much to our children. And for ourselves and heal as well. So there's a lot of goodness coming up. Thanks for hanging and checking that out with me today. Hope the tips helped. Again, your main takeaway in the chat or comments, I promise you, is as much for you as it is for me and the other people listening. One thing about using your words and when you will and when you won't, when you will and when you won't request that of the kids. And yeah, anything that you want to try next, just let us know. Pop it in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to do our little wrap up here. And looking forward to, let me just take a glance at what we got going on next week. So next week is off. And then we are just a couple weeks away from the podcast launch. So first episodes drop March 11th. And then we do have a launch party. And a launch party is just when we get together, have fun, celebrate. And it's on the evening of March 18th Pacific, in Pacific time. So we'll see you. We'll see more announcements about that and some fun invitations, and hope to see you there. But do feel free to subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you get those. And then we will be launching on all the platforms that you listen to podcasts. So we'll make sure to get those to you as the season rolls out. All right, lots of love to each and every one of you. Until next time, bye for now.